Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome to the show. We're excited to have our friend and next guest here, Georgena Grace, joining us here. She's the director of Integrated Wellbeing Institute. Yes, from Portland, Oregon. She's here joining us live today to talk more about the Institute and all that it can do to help people and, of course, support people, especially those grieving. Please, Georgena, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you very much, Jill. It's a pleasure to meet all of you today because what we know is we are swimming in global grief, and grief can be so scary. So the Institute is here to train and certify therapists, nurses, and coaches so they can come into a place of centeredness and well-being with their clients, and people can move more quickly through grief because grief can be grueling.
For sure. Now, let me just ask right off the top, how can we reach out to you? Could you share all forms of contact, the website, phone number, any social media pages you'd like for us to have?
Oh, certainly. You may contact us through integratedwellbeinginstitute.com. And there's a contact, of course, right at the top. And then the phone number is 503-309-3966. And we have social media presence at integratedwellbeinginstitute.com on Facebook and Instagram. Beautiful. And then we're on LinkedIn, of course.
Of course, you got to be, right? That's like the place to be. Everyone's telling me that I interview. You know, I'm not a big LinkedIn person, but I hear it's where to be, right? For businesses to promote yourself. I know I got to get started with that.
It's really easy, Jill. And yes, the quality of people that are there and the sincerity is heartwarming.
Oh, well, it's exciting to have you here. And I think it's important that we get your background. I know your mother used to work as an RN. Share a little bit about where you grew up and what brought you into this field. I would love to hear your backstory. I think it's important for people to get to know you today.
Yes, we all have a backstory, don't we,
yeah,
Jill?
We do.
So I grew up in the Midwest, specifically Nebraska. It's that flat state that everybody wishes they could fly through instead of drive through because it's so far across it. But I grew up with a mother who worked part-time as an RN. And when my brother Alan began stuttering in 9th grade, she said, "You know, Georgena, you should be a speech therapist. You will always work." And she was absolutely right, Jill. And so I was a speech pathologist for 40 years before I began then working specifically with grieving people in this mind-body process that I'm certified in. So that's how I got started as a professional person. And then, like as life happens to so many of us, in my 40s, we had 5 people in our family die, Jill, in the years. So it began with my brother Mark, who died of suicide. And later that month, my father-in-law died, and we'd been able to say goodbye to him. We'd had our anticipatory grieving. So it was 2 very different kinds of grief with those deaths. Then in 1997, my mother died in July of a brain tumor, and my father dropped dead of a heart attack in December. And that is so typical of couples that have been married and heart connected for so many years. Mother and dad were married for 51 years. It was the grief, though, of my son's sudden death in January of 1998. So it was just weeks after Dad had died that Reed died. And it brought me to my knees. So that's why I work with grieving people. I've been there.
Oh my goodness. And you know, you clearly, from your attitude, your positivity, have gotten through. Not that it's always easy, but you're able to overcome it, which is amazing that you're helping so many people do the same. I lost my mom 5 years ago to lung cancer. I had a 2-month-old baby. I had a 2-year-old. I took care of her in the end. And, you know, we all go through grief in life. Unfortunately, it's part of life, but, you know, there's some people who haven't yet, and I don't wish it upon them, but I know eventually it's going to happen, and it's okay. It's hard as it is, because time does heal, right? And you're here, you're living proof. I think we all are, right? Would you also say time also has a place in this as well in healing?
Well, it's very interesting because many people resent that cliche,
Mm,
time heals
I
all
don't.
things.
It doesn't. It's the truth. Over time, it gets easier. Doesn't make it go away, but it does.
That's right. You're
And I don't,
absolutely
yeah, not to
right.
take it lightly to anyone. I wouldn't say that to someone who just lost someone, but
Right.
for someone, yes. Thank you.
Because grief never goes away, but it does become different. It does become something that can be a gift to us because we're not broken by this loss. We're broken open like a seed to grow in self-awareness and new connections. And you have gone through that, obviously,
Hmm.
knowing that things are different for you now.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm, yeah. So, yes, grief, it happens to all of us. You're absolutely right. And for many years, Jill, I wondered, how can this be? And then all I had to do was really wake up and take a look at nature. We live in cycles: birth, death, creation, destruction. It's the way it is.
Hmm.
So for us, when we finally get to that place of awareness
Yep.
that I don't like this, I've never been in such pain, this is something I wish I could just speed through. But what are the gifts in this? Where
Yeah.
is the growth in this?
Hmm.
And it was really interesting because last night, Jill, I went to the movie A Man Called Otto.
Oh, I just saw the coming attraction for that. How was it?
Oh, it was so heart-opening and
At
heartwarming,
the
and it
same time, yeah.
actually, yes, and what it really does is it deepens what you and I are talking about, is
Hmm.
the fact that grief is excruciating,
Yeah.
and you can grow and become different as
Hmm.
a result of it.
Yeah.
There's that pulling in that all of us must do, but there's also the reaching out and allowing other people to support us.
Yeah. Very true.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Also, I mean, just to digress down to your notes again, I don't want to put you in out of any order, but you also certify nurses, therapists, coaches on this somatic grief relief, as you say, right? There's so much to the work, and also identifying the root cause of our unhappiness. You say based on our core beliefs, and what is the new paradigm of grief? So there's a lot of questions I have. I'll let you take it at
Oh,
your own
good.
pace. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, the new paradigm of grief is something I've alluded to.
Hmm.
You're not broken by this loss.
Yeah.
You're broken open like a seed to grow in self-awareness and new connections. So what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is being able to deeply listen to those shattered parts of you when
Hmm.
you're grieving. And all of us have stress. Wouldn't you agree, Jill?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, for
And
sure.
so self-awareness is when we can stop for a moment, just pause and say, oh, do I need to take a breath? Do
Yeah.
I need to uncross my legs and put both feet on the floor
Yeah.
and feel myself here?
Hmm.
Self-awareness is coming into connection
Yeah.
with that deep peace that is our birthright.
Hmm.
And then the new connections, actually, there's a lot of research out there right now on grief. And neuroscientist Andrew Huebner on a podcast recently said, the work of grief is to create new connections in
Hmm.
time and space, thus your time,
Correct.
that we've alluded to earlier. And so that's what we need to do. We make new connections with them. We answer the question, who am I now in
Yeah.
life? Now that my son is not here, I am not going to parent him. He
Hmm.
died when he was 15 and a half. So I can either say I failed as a parent, or I can say, wait a minute, who am I now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm, mhm. So I am one of those parents whose child died of suicide. I say Reed's death was really actually, Jill, impulsive. He had failed a breathalyzer test at school. He'd been kicked off the basketball team and was suspended from school for 3 days. And the last time I saw him, his head was in his hands. And I said, Reed, remember our family motto. We'll get through this. Every problem has a manageable solution. But Jill, because he was in such a state of despair, I don't even know if he heard.
Yeah.
So while I was comforting his girlfriend and his dad was talking to the basketball coach, because you left Reed alone when he was upset, he'd work things out. He ran home and literally lost face. And so it was one of those things for me to say, who am I now? So the intention of the Institute is to provide professionals who work with grieving people to have the tools so they themselves can stay in that deep self-awareness and connection.
Yeah.
Because I think all three of those people or areas of professionals, the nurses, the coaches, the therapists, know how grueling grief is, and it can be exhausting. And we really have to be mindful of how to care for ourselves, as well as then allow our grieving clients to get out of their head and into their body. Because you may have had those thoughts that's run around and round in your head. Why is mother going through this? Yeah, why? Yeah. And that's what happens to so many people, especially who have someone who dies of suicide. And I want to comment right now, Jill, on my languaging.
Sure.
And the reason is that the listeners have heard me say die of suicide. People die of cancer. People die of heart attacks. People die of strokes. So the languaging now that will dissipate more and more of the stigma of suicide is to use the languaging, people die of suicide. Yeah. So, yeah. So the Institute is here to provide these very unique processes because people can't think their way through grief. Yeah. I don't know about you, Jill, but when these griefs happen, I mean, here you were with, did I hear you say
I had a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old, and it was, yeah.
And so you were exhausted to the bone, I'm imagining,
Oh
as
yeah,
a
I
new
spent 6
mother.
months with my mom pregnant and then having the baby. I bought a house just so she could move in with me and I could take care of her because my father couldn't do that for her. I lived about an hour away. I moved, I quit my job. It was like life just changes, but you do that for those that you love. But yes, it was exhausting. But can I tell you something? It was the best, most amazing time of my life, giving so much to someone that I love so much, So there's a lot of good with the bad always, right?
Yes. Did you go through anticipatory grief? Was there, when your mother finally passed, was there a relief that her suffering was over?
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, absolutely. Because you don't want to see someone in pain like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yes. But still, now I could bring tears to my eyes because it's still, you don't want to lose that person. But again, they weren't the same person, which I'm sure you
Yes.
can relate to as well, like your son. Mentally things changed for him and he wasn't who he was, which is sad, but it is sad. You still love that person and you know who that person was before they were sick and had this illness. So, yeah.
And for Reed, my brother Mark had that illness that was so long, and he was in Nebraska at the time, and he had his disease diagnosed and was on medication for 10 years. And one Sunday he went to church and the minister said, anybody who takes medication doesn't have enough faith in Jesus. So Mark quit taking his, and 2 weeks later, Jill, he was dead. Now, yeah, with Reed, he was one of those impulsive deaths. Somewhere from leaving the school and saying to his buddies, I'll see you on the basketball floor next year. He snapped like a reed in the wind. And his name was Reed. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, things here.
Oh,
But like
wow.
you said, the switch flipped. He wasn't himself and he was gone. So, yeah. But I want to go back to our grieving after our mothers died. Because when mother died, I
Ah,
realized that I would need support.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I signed up, Jill, for an aqua size class, and I showed up every Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings with women of all ages, many of whom were the ages of my mother. And we
Wow.
got in that pool and we talked, and they were my friends anyway from book club. But it
Oh my
was so
goodness.
comforting to be
Yes.
with women who were the same age as my mother.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my, I just looked down. I don't have my coffee, but I have the same cup, the same color too. I got rid of it before. Yes, that's my favorite color. And that's all I drink my coffee and my tea out of. But I already drank it this morning, so I moved on to a water bottle. But oh,
Good for you.
well, let's just remind everyone, we're over halfway through the show, so we usually stop to remind everyone, how do we contact you again? Tell us your contact information, please.
Certainly. The website is integrated wellbeing institute.com. The phone number is 503-309-3966. And then I have a YouTube channel that I failed to mention earlier, Jill. And
Sure.
you may find it by searching Integrated Wellbeing Institute or Georgena Grace. And that is Georgena with an E, not an I, because Jill, my dad's name was George, and I was the firstborn.
Oh,
So I'm Georgena.
oh my goodness. Wow. See, I love it. I love it. And by the way, your website again, it's Integrated Well-Being Institute. Okay.
Institute.
Okay, because when I kept clicking on it, it's not working because on the notepad, on the notes that I got sent, there's no E, it's BEIN Institute. There's no G there. So that's just an error. So I'm like, oh my God, the website's not working. I got to tell her. But thank you,
Good.
Well-Being. Got it,
Okay.
got it, got it. I mean, there's so much more to what you have to do, and what you want to share with us. So, for the last, we still have 8 minutes left in the show. My goodness, time goes quick. What else
It
did
does.
you want to share, Georgina, about you and your services?
Well, it's very important. Okay, this is interesting, Jill. Here we are, and you can hear my voice.
Mm,
And so what I call this is gentle grief.
okay.
So, of course, I'm going to clear my throat. But remember how we said grief never goes away, it becomes different.
Yeah.
So, for those people that are listening right now, it's important for them to hear about the three states
Okay.
of grief we can
Mm-hmm.
be in. We can be in raw grief, and that's that grief, Jill, that can be, it happens at the time of the loss. And that loss then, it can last anywhere from 90 days to a year.
Yeah.
And in that time, grief is foreground. Everything is about that loss.
Yeah.
That person is constantly on your mind. That death of a dream is on your mind. That event, like
Mm-hmm.
your home being washed away in a tornado or a flood.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all there. And so that's the time when you're in this state where everything is about grief. And
Mm-hmm.
then you move into a state that's more fragile. And you and I both remember that state where we look better, we
Yeah.
show up, people don't know we're grieving, Jill, but we're barely holding ourselves together because
Yeah.
we're in fragile grief.
So
And then
true.
finally, what happens is we move into gentle grief. Now, what
Mm-hmm.
happened just a few minutes ago with my voice is the grief was bubbling up.
Yeah.
And so I stopped and I named it here on this program and said,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's my gentle grief.
Yeah.
And so by naming it, I claimed it, and then it dissipated.
Yeah.
So as we said earlier, we're always going to be in grief, but it becomes different. So I wanted to share that with people.
Ah,
And I think it's very important too for anyone who is a therapist, a nurse or a coach to hear this story about myself. I'm going to be very vulnerable, Jill.
Oh, go, 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 go.
Remember how remember how I said that this work is grueling and we really have to take care of ourselves? Well, one of the things I do regularly is massages. So when I went in to see my massage therapist on December 20th, I said, okay, what are you noticing? How's my
Yeah,
body? She said, Georgena, she said, you must be working a lot. Your
yeah,
body feels like a tea bag that has soaked up the grief of other people.
yeah.
So at that point in time, Jill, what I knew is it was important for me to really reverse, put the brakes
Yeah,
on, and do radical self-care for myself. Become more self-aware.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Put that oxygen mask on first, right?
You got it. Absolutely. That's right. Mhm, mhm.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. I don't know if you're taking a breath. What else did you want to share? Like, does she want me to interject? I
I
see you're
was wait.
reading.
Yes.
I see
Yeah,
you're reading something. So I think you have
yeah.
something else planned. Go ahead.
Well, I was just waiting for the next question from you because I'm sure there has been some things that I've said that may have not been clear to our listeners.
Oh
But
my,
one of the things you mentioned earlier, Jill, was you said part of what we do at the Institute is to allow people to be able to come from that place of responding instead of reacting.
mhm,
And we do that by teaching
mm,
people, especially in the business world, Jill, to pause and with
and
self-awareness, go into those new behaviors instead of those habitual responses
yeah,
that we all have.
mhm,
And so then the other thing that we do at the Institute is work with people to allow them to notice, okay, this is not working in my life. What's the core belief that's under that, that's keeping you from your happiness? So,
Also, I know now, just curious, again, when did you lose your son? How many years has it been now?
Jill, next week it will be 25 years.
Oh, my goodness. My
Mhm.
goodness. And he talked to so many parents saying, how do you lose a child? It's not supposed to be that way. Not, and I'm sure
Oh,
there's people out there who can relate to you. And especially
mhm.
as far as grief, they're still going through grief. You will always have grief from the
Yes.
situation. But
Mhm.
advice you would give to someone out there who may have recently lost a loved one, what advice would you give them to get started, to start the healing process? Just maybe someone today, we can change a life today just by listening. Any words of advice? Thank
Yes.
you.
Number one, grieve every day.
Okay.
It is important for you to allow yourself time, maybe in the shower, maybe in the car. Maybe it was like my dad grieved my mother.
Yeah.
He put a picture, Jill, on his
Mm-hmm.
dresser of mother.
Yeah.
And every morning he told her about what he was going to do that day. And then every evening, he told her how the day went. And
Oh.
in the beginning of the day and in the end of the day, my dad cried as he missed her
Ah.
and he longed for her. So
Oh.
that's the first thing. And then the second thing was what you just said, Jill. Listen, listen deeply
Yeah.
to yourselves because we're all wired to have inner peace.
Yeah.
We were born with it. But what happens is it gets covered up. The noise of the world, the noise of our family. Oh, Jill, the noise of what's going on in our mean mind can cover that up. So if you're someone who's had a recent loss of
Yeah.
any kind, maybe a divorce, maybe a diagnosis of an illness, stop
Yeah.
down, feel your feet on the floor, feel your hips in the chair, allow yourself to feel the support of the chair, and realize you're not alone.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Thank you. And we are just about out of time. Gosh, it happens so quick. How can we, what do you want to say to end the show? And of course, how can we reach out to you? Thank you.
Well, Jill, I would invite anyone who's listening to very carefully type in integratedwellbeinginstitute.com. And when you arrive at that website, there's a couple places to go. If you're a grieving person, click the video that's at the very top of the page. And it talks about 3 aspects of grief that every single one of us experience.
Yeah.
If you're a professional that's really intrigued about being able to show up with vitality and energy, no matter what's happening with the client in front of you as a telehealth professional or in person, I invite you to go to the resources page, the professional support.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And remind us how we can reach out to you.
Yes, give me a call, 503-309-3966.
Perfect.
Or Integrated Wellbeing Institute, or find us on Facebook at that address, Instagram, or be sure and find me on LinkedIn, because we're always posting tips and videos, Jill, to support people, both the grieving and the professionals who serve them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next time we speak, and you have a fantastic day. Thank you for filling us in on your institute, the work you're doing, and thank you for helping so many people. And clearly you're here making a difference. And by getting the word out even further to people that could use your help is so important. Thank you again. Have a great day. Looking forward to our next conversation, Georgena. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Really. You have this energy about you, positivity about you. And that's not always easy when someone experiences grief, but you are living proof that it's possible, and people need to see and hear that. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.